Hi, good morning. It's Gene from the maverickstar Observatory. Before we get into it, just a big thanks to all those that are supporting us over the last few days. Special thanks to Bob and Jen. It is absolutely amazing that you've stuck with us at the observatory for as long as you have, and I can't thank you enough. And I know that the subscribers also feel the same way about that. So we're looking at the temperature on the globe W3 map at North Skull, and I just can't help but feel that what we see in sub-zero temperatures matches on the magnetic intensity. You can see these regions over the northern hemisphere, the purple region over Canada showing sub-zero temperatures probably in the -30s to 40s, maybe a little higher. There's another one over there in Russia, and then on the Antarctic peninsula you can see the same thing. Around about 2 years ago, if you was to travel south of Argentina, there used to be on that side of the Arctic peninsula a darker region of temperature, and we've seen a dissipation of the magnetic intensity there, and we've also seen a reduction in the magnetic intensity over Canada. On the other scale, if we look at where Australia is, it's one of the hottest continents on the planet. But really what I wanted to bring to your attention is the level over the northern hemisphere of sub-zero temperature creeping down towards the equatorial region on most of the largest continents on this planet. And you can see the amount of land that is left without these sub-zero temperatures. I've said it over the last couple of weeks that we could be witnessing a return to a glacial period, and the fact is we can't be 100% sure on that prediction, but we can use our best guess and some of the predictions if we look at the 400,000 year temperature record. The reason why we can't be 100% sure about that is simply because there was no recorded data from eyewitnesses at the time. It was, after all, over 12,000 years ago. But the point is that there are 7.5 billion people on this planet, and most of the northern hemisphere, all those continents there that are covered in this sub-zero temperature, are or is the land that we depend on for growing our crops. And if we are to see persistent spreading of the temperatures at lower latitudes towards the equatorial region, then it is going to disturb our crop production, and like I mentioned in the video yesterday, in turn we are going to see food inflation. We'll also see other things. If we get prolonged periods of sub-zero temperatures, and it starts to foul up the electrical grid, breaking cables and blowing out transformers, then we could see what was shown in that video, grid down, that we witnessed after a couple of weeks of having no electrical grid, that it wasn't long before the logistics of these modern countries in the West were brought to the knees and civil unrest started. And this is something that we've seen in our history. If we go back to the blockade in Stalingrad during the Second World War, cannibalism came about, and over a short period of time many people were dying in the thousands, tens of thousands every month, fighting over food rations. So it shows us clearly that it is within us to behave barbaric, and it's only these things can come about in a real short space of time, within 2 weeks. So we've seen this before. We're looking at the magnetic intensity of the highest intensities on our planet. You can see one over Canada, one over Russia, and one just creeping up on the south coast of Australia, which is coming off the easterly, if you like, Antarctic peninsula. And if we just pay attention to what's in between the two plumes over Russia and Canada, you'll see where the UK is, it's a moderate intensity, and just pay attention to where the fringes are of these two high intensity regions over Canada and Russia, where it starts to fade out a lot, and compare it with the weather chart here. We can see that where the magnetic plume ends, and right here in the UK, and then swarms around all over Russia, is almost an exact representation of what we see on that magnetic chart. The only thing that doesn't match quite so is that one that is creeping up on Australia for some reason. Just get it back up for you. But again, if you look where the UK is, and with regards to the intensity of magnetism there, and compare it with the temperature, you'll see that where there is less intensity, there is warmer climates in those regions, and where the highest magnetic intensities are, they are very, very cold regions. And that's why I said before, I don't think it's for any coincidence that we have on the Antarctic and Arctic regions magnetic poles, and likewise rotational axes. Although we haven't at this point noticed a rotational axis shift, that doesn't mean that it's not on the cards to do so at a later date. I just wanted to show you the state of our jet streams at the moment. And here we go. We can see that the subtropical jet stream in some regions over the northern hemisphere has merged with the polar jet stream. It's, if you can call it that, it's very fragmented, but the main point is how low it lies off the equatorial region. We've got some vertical drops almost in the, if you like, the sine wave of the northerly jet stream and in the southerly jet stream. This is, I think, is going to be a more common occurrence, but this is exactly what destroys crops over those continents. When you get Arctic air come down in these low troughs, it's going to bring rain as soon as it hits that warmer temperature or around them subtropical regions. And likewise, when it carries it up from the subtropical region up into the northerly regions or the polar regions, we're going to get a lot more snow. But generally, if the jet stream is low, it will be attracting lower temperatures in them regions. And I just wanted to show you guys the condition of our planet right now. And this has nothing at all to do with CO2 in our atmosphere. Like I've said before, we could double the amount of our CO2 that mankind puts into the atmosphere. We could increase it to 80 gigatons if you wanted. It wouldn't make any difference to the climate at all. CO2 is not driving climate. You'd have to be crazy to think something that is less than 1% of the composition of our atmosphere actually is capable of driving climate. We're getting so many things wrong in this world. It just sometimes makes me wonder, whether we have logic and intelligence. So much money is invested in, first of all, these weather modelling systems, and yet they fail to predict weather after 4 days. A weather modelling system doesn't have all the elements in it that it needs to be more accurate, and it's just impossible to put those elements in there because we struggle with supercomputers to model even the most complex weather modelling systems that we have today. The other thing is that when you are able to adjust the if you like, what's it called, the calibration of these certain elements. Say you want to add carbon to your weather modelling system, you're going to have a calibration tool where you can increase carbon and decrease carbon to see how that affects the outcome of climate in your system. The problem is that when you do that, how do you know that the amount that you're putting in is the right amount, or the amount that you've not put in is enough? The other thing is that we have so many different gases in our atmosphere. It would be completely impossible to incorporate all these into a real sophisticated weather modelling system. If you ask, whether they add into the weather modelling system geomagnetic data, I bet you would find that they don't, as well as all the other things that they don't. And that's the reason why weather modelling systems can't predict 10 years into the future, and they are limited really to, like I say, around about four days, and that's your best. We're living in strange times, guys. We've seen a new religion come out. It is a religion, without a doubt. CO2 and man-made climate change. It's a religion. It's just surprising me that they're getting away with it, and that more people aren't witnessing this very bad magician on the stage that is trying to show us that he's doing levitation with sticks in above his hands or below his hands, when clearly the strings are visible. It's exactly the same as what these governments are doing in ripping off the public across the whole of the world. Trillions are being raised in this scam. I was thinking about Spence Mark's research with the cloud chamber that CERN carried out. Again, they only put a couple of these elements in there at CERN, and then introduced cosmic radiation to see if they could get cloud formation or to precipitate, or get some precipitation going in the chamber. And of course they never. And the reason why they never is because they only used 2 of the elements in our atmosphere, when there are many elements in there. And if you're not going to start off with the right ingredients to make strawberry pop, if you're going to start off with bananas and apples, then you shouldn't be surprised that you don't get a drink at the end of it that doesn't taste of strawberries. And that's exactly what they did there. And the reason why they did it was clear. It's because they wanted to keep the taxes going with regards to CO2, and they didn't want to incorporate cosmic radiation into the public arena, because it would have been more understandable if they did, and of course they wouldn't have been able to make the taxes like they do. So just shows you what sort of world we're living in, doesn't it, guys? It's worrying really, because we do live in a world where money seems to be more worth than life, and not just the humans but everything on this planet. They seem to not want to see a continuation of the earth going greener as a result of more cosmic radiation, and as a result of a little bit of an increase in CO2. The earth has increased in greenness, and that just provides more habitats for a lot of biodiversities on our planet. And what could be wrong with that? If we cut the greenhouse gas, if we cut the CO2s down to 200 parts per million, 150 parts per million, we'd not only shut down the vegetation growth on this planet ourselves as well. And who would want to reduce CO2 if that was what was going to be the outcome? Look how close we are to 150 parts per million, as opposed to how far we are away from 1,000 parts per million. I showed you in my living room, guys. We've got over 1,000 parts in most of our living rooms. You go on a packed commuter train, those parts per millions can go up to 1,500, 2,000 parts per million, and you can still breathe quite healthily in that environment. So we're nowhere near hazardous quantities of CO2, and yet we've got companies like Greenpeace, NASA, NOAA, all screaming about the dangers that we face. The fact that the ice caps are going to melt, and they haven't. They predicted that this would happen 5 years ago, and they haven't. That we was going to lose lots of things. It just simply hasn't happened, is it, guys? So, guys, I don't want to take up too much of your time today. I just want to say before I end the video, there's a link there if you want to help support what we do. What we're trying to do at the moment is put more equipment out into the field in different countries, and try and get a grip on what is actually going on with our world with regards to cosmic radiation and geomagnetic changes that are taking place, as well as keep a track on, the ever increasing grand solar minimum that we seem to be slipping into, and yet to date we have not seen an equilibrium on any of these things. So be safe, guys, and as always, I'll say what I usually do. Bye for now.